Yaida Ford, Ward 8 Table Talk.
Creating opportunities and fighting for you. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Yaida Ford's Ward 8 Table Talk. As you know, I'm Yaida Ford. I'm running to become the next Ward 8 City Council member. And through these table talks, I'm engaging residents on issues that are the most impactful to Ward 8 residents. So today, I'd like to welcome Raymond Caldwell to the show. Hi, Raymond. Welcome.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, it is so good to see you again. We met at the last production that I attended at the Anacostia Playhouse, and that was the Bitter Earth stage play.
Yeah, this
Awesome
Bitter
show.
Earth by Harrison David Rivers. Thank you so much. And we at Theater Alliance are really proud of it.
Yes. So for those of you who don't know Raymond, he is the producing artistic director of the Theater Alliance. He's been there since January 2019, and they are the resident company at the Anacostia Playhouse, which is located right in our very own Anacostia neighborhood on Shannon Place. He was the resident director and lecturer in the Department of Theater Arts at HU, the illustrious Howard University.
You know. Yes.
His directorial work. Yes, we had to do that. I had to do that. Y'all know I'm a Howard alum. I had to do it. His work at Howard includes Breath Boom, I Too Sing America, Fabulation, Anything Goes, and my personal fave, Trojan Women, and several others. He holds a Master of Fine Arts in acting with a focus in community outreach. And his resume is actually a lot longer than what I just laid out, but I've invited him on because of his current role at the Anacostia Playhouse and because he's also a fellow Ward 8 resident. So Raymond, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for this platform just to talk about our community. I think it's so important in this moment.
Yes, it is. And this is now more than ever, is it important to really give voice to some of the issues that our residents are experiencing. And, people are connecting a lot more now because of the pandemic. And I think this is one of the, I guess I would say the silver lining is that we're able to connect a lot more heart to heart, breast to breast on issues. So, I want to jump right into it. So tell us a little bit about you and how you ended up at the Anacostia Playhouse.
Yeah, so I've been in DC now for 13 years, and I showed up in DC actually doing an internship, a fellowship at Arena Stage, and then forgot to leave, and so I've been here ever since. I worked at Arena Stage for a number of years doing community engagement and building education programming throughout DC, and then went on to work at Howard and spent some time at Howard, really focused on my craft, pouring into Black artists, Black artistry, telling stories that centered Black communities. And then slowly got involved with Theater Alliance. I started by producing a festival, and after producing that festival, became the associate artistic director because I just fell in love with the mission of this organization, and that was to serve Ward 8 and to be present here in Ward 8, one of the only professional theater companies, and we're an award-winning theater company, that is in Ward 8 serving our community, and so when the previous artistic director Colin Hovey stepped down. I applied and they wanted me. And so the very first thing I did was I moved to Ward 8 and wanted to become a theater company that was resident, that was focused on Ward 8 and Anacostia from the inside.
Yeah, beautiful. And you've been here ever since. So there are a lot of stigma. There's a lot of stigma over Ward 8. Right, and the issues, and the arts have really been. First of all, Ward 8 gives birth to artist upon artist, right? And we are like a cultural center, in the District of Columbia, and so I want you to talk a little bit about some of the partnerships that Anacostia Playhouse has been able to establish with like Ballou High School, some of the community partnerships that Anacostia Playhouse has been involved with in Ward 8.
Yeah, so Theater Alliance, we're trying to be very intentional about how we build community. It's not just about one-off partnerships. I find often, community building is at the center of what my career has always been, community building through the arts. And so sometimes when we think about community building, it is let me pop in, particularly as a cultural organization like a theater, let me pop in and do one-off programming and then leave. But for me, that's not cultural building, right? That's actually me just giving you a product and then you absorbing it and then me disappearing and possibly never coming back. And so we've been very intentional about the community that we're building. So every show that we produce actually partners with a community organization based here in Ward 8. And again, we have a number of long time partnerships. We are very excited to partner with Whitman Walker. So the last show we did was a production called This Bitter Earth that we met at. And it's a show about gay love, and it's a gay love story, a Black gay love story that doesn't center trauma in the traditional ways. And so we wanted to partner with an organization like Whitman Walker that actually has been here in Ward 8, providing services for LGBTQIA plus individuals. You know, there are a number of partnerships. We have the other partnership that I'm really proud of that we've navigated for now some time is the Wendt Center for Loss and Healing. When we think about the trauma that exists within our communities and within our homes, what are the spaces that we can process that? And the Wendt Center is a really fabulous way, a fabulous space and organization that does just that work. We have a number of school partnerships as well, and our education programming actually is beginning to build. You know, the core of our education programming actually partners with Thurgood Marshall, which is right down the street on Shannon Place. It's walking distance from our space. And so our community program, our school programming started with them. This season, we're really excited to begin partnering with other schools here in Ward 8, and then the pandemic happened. So we have education programming that's piloting this season that's K through 12.
Okay.
And I think that that's really fundamental. If we want to start talking about arts education and building the next generation of audience, then we have to start at the school level.
So when you say artistic programming, can you just tell our audience what that means? You know, for parents with kids who might be watching, okay, how can I get my kid involved in the arts, or how can my kid use that as an outlet? Can you describe a little bit, like specifically what you mean when you say artistic programming?
Yeah, so we at Theater Alliance are trying to be very, again, specific about how we build our programming, because our programming is more than just the fact that we put on a show. And I will say that we put on some really fabulous shows, but we want to think about community building, and community building means community programming. And so we are looking for organizations that we can partner with, and community programming uses theater. You know, one of the things that I do that I am very proud of in my own artistic career is that I've always been looking to use the art as a way to navigate real life. It's a theory of theater called applied theater. How are we taking theater and applying it to the actual life? And so I've been working with a number of organizations that actually practice social skills, for example, using the craft of theater and the arts. So our programming centers just that. How are we actually building community using the form of theater?
Okay, so this notion of applied theater, this concept, you know, in a K through 12 program, what would that look like? Would that be, you know, having classes at you know, K through 12, you know, schools, and maybe somebody from the Theater Alliance coming in, or somebody are partnering with a community-based organization to do an after-school program? What would that look like in Ward 8 for our residents?
That's a great question. So we began with our partnership with Howard University, because, you know, I got to get back to my to my babies. I got to get back to my school. So we have a partnership with Howard University that actually is bringing on a core of interns, and they're arts education interns. We are teaching these interns actually how to use the arts in community spaces, specifically in schools, because we know that the arts are disappearing from our schools. So our K through 12 programming looks like this, and I'm a firm believer that if we actually are infusing arts programming, specifically theater programming, into our schools, what we're building are a generation of folks who actually expect theater to be for them, because they've learned about theater through their whole education. And so at the elementary school level, this looks like first identifying what theater is as a form and learning what that is as a form. One of the programs that we're piloting actually brings stories to life. I was recently at a career day at an elementary school, and I had prepared this really wonderful PowerPoint presentation. And then I walked into the classroom and they were kindergarteners. And I was like, oh, well, I guess I can't do a PowerPoint presentation for these babies. But what we did was we took the Three Little Pigs, a story that they were learning, and we started playing with that story. We brought that story to life, teaching kindergarteners what a theater, what a play actually was. And so at the elementary school level, it's teaching what theater is. As we move to the middle school level, our programming shifts. Our programming actually becomes about making our students actual creators and using the stories of our community. And so at the middle school level, those students are taught to go back into their communities and interview grandparents, parents, neighbors, folks with rich stories, the stories of our community. And they bring those stories back into their classrooms. And then that teaching artist from Howard University teaches those young people how to take that story and turn it into a play. And then they actively do that. So we're also reinforcing key education components. And then at the high school level, it really is about now the mastery of theater. How are we actually teaching young people to take control of the theater experience? Last year, I did a program at Thurgood Marshall, and I realized that I had not
Thurgood Marshall
prepared my
Charter
students.
School in Anacostia, the high school? Okay.
Yeah. And I was so excited to bring these young people to see this play. We were doing this play called The Raid. And it was a really brilliant play about Frederick Douglass. And I was so excited about it. And when I brought this core of high school freshmen to the theater, the lights went out. And when the lights went out, they started screaming, because I hadn't prepared them for the experience of coming to the theater. I had taken for granted that perhaps they had never been to a theater experience, so they didn't understand the process of a very quick blackout. So that was on me to prepare them for the experience. And so when we move into our high school programming, it's about preparing our students to become not only theater audience, but critics as well. The idea that you don't have to like everything that you see, but understanding why theater is a cultural value and why it as a form is important. Those are ideas that you grapple with in our high school programming.
Yeah, certainly. And then understanding, making the connection between the arts and artistic expression and the importance of that for us as Black people. Now, you mentioned something earlier, that really provoked this question in me. The souls of Black people have been ravaged, very much so. And you see that in our communities. I mean, just this week, just outside, I'm seeing, just addiction and, folks, even in the midst of the pandemic, struggling, with day to day. And they were struggling before this happened, right? And hearing stories and, hearing the stories of our residents in our community and how some people ended up in Ward 8. I met a man yesterday, or 2 days ago, actually, who was helping me and another young man get a woman who was just laying out on the curb. She was just laying there, and we were, just trying to get her out of the street and coming to her aid. And he stopped, and eventually he started telling me his story about, his daughter who had just lost her husband. He was murdered on Alabama Avenue, and they have a 10-month-old daughter, and who was his 10-month-old granddaughter. And he had moved in with her basically to support her through that trauma, right? And then shortly after that, they lost another male family member. I think this was in like 1 or 2 years' time, to a similar violent crime, murder. So our souls, as Black people, particularly in this community, have just been ravaged by trauma. And I want you to talk a little bit. With two populations that I'm really concerned about that feel unseen and unheard. That's our returning citizens, our ex-offenders who come back and they're not able to get plugged in. I mean, DC, we talk a lot about the returning citizens and destigmatizing that, but we still have a recidivism rate that's one of the highest in the country. It's 50%. So half of them that come out, it's basically a revolving door. They go right back in. The other population, single moms, just really kind of feeling ill-equipped and underserved. And a lot of them have special needs children. So I want you to talk a little bit about, how the arts and the artistic community has been used historically and here really in Anacostia to serve these very ignored populations.
When I think about this moment, I think about quarantine and quarantine being a privilege. You know, that the idea that you have somewhere to seek refuge is a privilege. And when I think about the trauma that is occurring right now within homes, on our streets, on our corners, I'm still hearing gunshots outside my window. And what happens to then those people and those family members, and how do you have funerals in these moments? How do you grieve when you cannot hold one another? So when I think about the place of the arts and the role of the arts, I think the arts actually have a very significant place in our healing and how we go about healing. It always has historically. When I think about the souls of Black folks in that W.E.B. Du Bois way, when I think about the souls of Black folks, W.E.B. Du Bois even says and talks about the role of art and the import of art, because what art does is it actually gives us a place to imagine outside of this moment, to imagine the next moment, to imagine a better and brighter future, and actually give us the steps to go about achieving that. And we've seen that before. We've seen that historically. It's interesting to look historically on plantations and see slaves use moments like Canboulay, which are major celebrations of music and festival and theater, and use those moments to imagine how and where we can go, that this isn't the only moment. When I'm thinking about our programming and the work of our theater, we're actually looking to engage in these very conversations. I think that art is actually supposed to give us the place to the vocabulary to have these conversations. We watch and experience empathetically, and then we engage together. And all of our shows actually end in post-show conversations. We want to be very intentional about the conversations that our art creates. And so we've seen that in a number of our post-show conversations. We did a really beautiful show. It won a number of Helen Hayes Awards, called Word Becomes Flesh. And it actually is about the Black male experience in America. What happens when you return home after you've been incarcerated and home doesn't look like home anymore? What happens when your community does not see you the way that you left it? How do you step back into your child's life when you've been absent for so long? And what that show actually gave us the opportunity to do is actually, one, introduce this to folks who might not have this experience. That's incredibly important, to validate someone's lived experience, but then to give us actual not only space for conversation about what the experience is and the vocabulary to talk about that experience, but then past that, what I'm very proud of at Theater Alliance is that we are looking for actionable steps. Not only what are we talking about, but what are we doing? So that we're just not sitting passively. And so what we've been doing in all of our post-show conversations is actually inspiring our audience. If you think that this is important to you, then what you need to do is get involved. And we give you the steps, the tools to do just that. We connect you to cultural organizations that actually let you either be right on the front lines, because it takes all kinds. You can be on the front lines, holding the banner, or you can be in the background stapling packets. But it takes everyone for movements to happen.
That's right. That's amazing. I just got chills too, just talking about this notion of having a space, a safe space where Black men can talk and feel understood, because we are living in a community now with a changing dynamic. And, even when we deal with law enforcement, like when you talked about the gunshots and, me and a couple other community members out here, both of them were Black men helping me with the woman who was really just in a drunken stupor, and when the police showed up, all the officers were white, and I said, we can't leave her here. We can't say, oh, the police are here, let's go. We have to stay here and make sure that, because they figured out, she's high on something or whatever, that she's treated like a human being. And those Black men stayed. There was a younger one and an older one, and they stayed with me. And they're from different walks of life and had been through their own situations, right? And even the young man who I saw who stopped to care for her, he was drinking a beer from the convenience store and put his beer down to help the woman, And when the police came, the older man saw the open container and pushed it to the side, so that the police wouldn't see that and get distracted, because they know they're dealing with a bias. Right, that they're perceived. As soon as the police see a Black man or Black men see police, there's this immediate wall that goes up. right? So that moment kind of showed me that in the midst of all of the issues and the trauma that we're dealing with and the perception issues that we're dealing with, there's a shared sense of humanity still in our ward that really I haven't seen in other parts of the city, you know, particularly where my office is, and one of my offices in Capitol Hill. And, you know, they would have seen her on the street and walked over her just like she was one of the homeless people in the tent city. Nobody would have paid her any attention. But these men stopped to see about her, right? And when the police saw that we cared about her, the attitude of the police changed towards her because they saw how that we value Black lives. We value one another. It didn't matter that she was high on something. Right? She needed help.
That's not the perception of our ward. That's what's so frustrating to me. When you talk to folks outside of our ward, the idea, the perception is that Ward 8 is this scary, dangerous place and don't go there. But what I've seen throughout this, to your point, is folks taking care of one another. I came out my house the other day and my neighbor literally said, I was worried about you. I was about to go knock on that door because we've literally not seen you. My block is taking care of one another, you know, making sure, checking in on one another. I'm going to the grocery store. Is there anything you need?
Yes.
I don't see that. And, you know, when I bring that up to my friends who are living in other wards, when I say like, oh yeah, I check on my neighbors regularly, they don't have that same connection to their neighbors. So they're, what I am really looking at celebrating at Theater Alliance and building is a love for Ward 8, because I love Ward 8 and the people that are in my ward.
Yeah, and Ward 8 loves you. And so that love is definitely shared. So, you know, and this is, and I think I may close on this point. And that is this, you know, I know the Playhouse's history that started up on 8th Street, you know, before you could get a decent cup of coffee, right? You know, and then gentrification came. And then you guys came to Anacostia, and you see what's happening, you know, around us. I don't think anybody can ignore that. I want you to talk to us as Ward 8 residents about how an artistic presence, how Theater Alliance can preserve the sense of cultural identity that makes us who we are as a ward, even though gentrification is coming. You know, I read like an excerpt from Silenced Voices, you know, that was on, I think, Anacostia Playhouse's website. And this, you know, there are people, you know, gentrification has the good and bad, you know, people are fear displacement, right? And we want a sense of identity preserved. Talk about how the arts, you know, preserves, that is like a preserving agent for a community like ours in the midst of emerging economic development, which a lot of people know that's a code word for gentrification, right? You know, and we want it done responsibly here, but we realize it's going to take some effort on our part to make sure that our identity is preserved in the midst of this. So can you talk to that a little bit, Raymond?
Yeah, you know, I've been watching in the midst of the pandemic, America in color, and it's turn of the century film that has been colorized now for us to see it in a very different light. And as I watch these videos, I realize I'm doing that thing that I did as a kid all the time. I'm looking for the Black faces. I'm looking for the Black faces to validate my existence, to validate that I was there, to validate that my people were there and a part of it and a part of this thing we call America. And so I think that when we start thinking about the history of Ward 8 specifically, those who are remembered are those who have their stories written down. And so I am looking for opportunities to actually celebrate the very rich history that we find here in our ward, the stories that my neighbors, that these old Black women tell me, I adore. I can linger and I could sit for hours on their porches and listen to them talk to me. And so there's something about teaching our community to preserve our stories and then celebrate one another's stories. So I'm trying to imagine ways in which the art that we're creating at our theater, that we're celebrating and moving through our community, is doing just that, remembering who we are, documenting who we are. And in spite of everything, as we continue to shift and change, as gentrification happens, I think that art actually has a very pivotal role in questioning how gentrification happens. Because what we mean by gentrification is that we have access to schools, that we have access to grocery stores. Black people want that, and the community, the people who live in this community now want that. They don't want to have to be displaced. And so how is art actually asking those questions? What is gentrification? And how do we actually, as a community, take control of it, inspire our community to actually move and fight against it?
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you know, just the fluidity of art, you know, and the diversity and the complexity of art,
Yeah.
you know, and the way we can use art to speak our piece and to make ourselves prominent and known, because we are. I mean, we are a force in the district. You know, Black people are the economic. I mean, look at all the essential people. I'm essential, right? And if it weren't for the pandemic, I would be in the office every day, but I can't sit next to my staff while they're in the office. So we swap off. Everybody on my team is still working. So, you know, you see the workers, you know, and many of the people who are showing up to our office buildings, serving as security, concierges, cleaning the bathrooms, they are Black people, and they're putting
My whole
themselves
block
in
is
harm's
still
way every
working.
day. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is a very powerful conversation. So, Raymond, how can people support the Anacostia Playhouse through COVID-19?
That's a great question. And, you know, like we have been very specific about not making asks in this moment, financial asks in this moment, because I totally recognize that folks, particularly folks in my community, are strapped right now. We are wondering where our next dollar bill comes from. So what I have been asking folks to do, we are about to start this through our own website at Theater Alliance, but we're actually going to start figuring out ways that we can start creating art and using art to have very complex conversations, how we can use art to document who we are, use art to document our community. So to participate in that. And then when we start our next season, I'm really excited. Our next season is going to focus on Washington, D.C. and artists here in the DMV for the full season. And so I want folks in Ward 8 to come out more than anything. You know, our theater, the Anacostia Playhouse, is tucked away on Shannon. And there are so many residents who regularly come and they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know this was here.
Right.
So I want folks from Ward 8 to start coming to the theater. The first 10 tickets are literally name your own price. Whatever you want the price of that ticket to be, you name that price, because we want to be sure that funding is not a barrier to anyone to come in, you know? So there's space for everybody. So I want folks to take this moment to contemplate life, to participate, create art, and then when we're back up and running, to come out to the Anacostia Playhouse and to check us out, to check out our work, support our work by coming out.
Awesome. So real quick, Raymond, if there's any social media that you want to give the audience or website, can you please do it in 10 seconds or less?
Yes, it is www.theateralliance. That's theater with an ER, theateralliance.com. Visit our website. We're on all social media platforms. Check us out and participate with us. Check out our art.
Yes, thank you so much, Raymond Caldwell. Everybody, thank you for joining me for Yaida Ford's Ward 8 Table Talk on the Arts. And Raymond, I will see you soon, everybody. I will see you next time.
Yaida Ford, Ward 8 Table Talk.
Creating opportunities and fighting for you.